Showtime! Welcome to the show. I'm Brent, Holland, and welcome to Night Fright, folks. Get in your comfy chair, put your feet up, get the coffee going, get the juice going, get the tea going, or whatever type of beverage you would like to drink tonight. Have we got a show for you? His name is legendary. His story has been told in countless Hollywood feature films, documentaries, and books. He is virtually synonymous with Prohibition, organized crime, and Chicago. I speak, of course, of none other than Al Capone. Our guest tonight knew Mr. Capone. As a matter of fact, she's his grandniece. Our guest tonight is Deirdre Marie Capone, folks. She virtually sat on Uncle Al's lap. We're going to be looking at a first person's real account of Al Capone tonight. You know, folks, she's got a new book out, and I'm just going to read this a little bit. She's got a new book out called Uncle Al Capone. Tonight we're going to look at the myths, the legend, and the truth behind the man they nicknamed Scarface. It's going to be a great show, folks. The real life Al Capone for once. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, folks. Welcome to Night Fright. I'm your host, Brent Holland. Our guest tonight, Deirdre Marie Capone. She's got a new book out called Uncle Al Capone, The Man His Family Knew. Now, I'm just going to read a little bit about Deirdre's unique qualifications. Her grandfather was Ralph Capone, listed in 1930 as public enemy number 3 by the Chicago Crime Commission. That makes her grandniece of public enemy number 1, Al Capone. As a child, she didn't know she was a notorious... As a child, she didn't know he was a notorious gangster. He was just her Uncle Al. From age 7 to 13, her classmates were not allowed to play with her. A lot of this, folks, when you carry a name like that, it carries a weight across with it. Let me read on. When she was 10, her father committed suicide because he carried the name Capone. At age 18, she was fired from her first job because of the name Capone. We're going to look at all that and the legend, the myth, the truth about the man she called Uncle Al. I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brent.
It's really terrific to have you.
Thank you.
Let's start off right away, shall we? You were just a little one when Al passed away. Mr. Capone passed away. What are your recollections as a child of this man, the myth, the legend they call Al Capone?
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I was born with a photographic memory. So I have quite a good recollection. I can still hear the sound of his voice, see the glint in his eye, the color of his face. I remember how he sounded, the smell of his cigar, the glisten in his hair, the smell of his cologne. I remember all of that like it just happened.
When he spoke with you, was he giving you life lessons? Kind of metaphors for life, things of that nature? Is there something you recall that stands out in your mind, one thing above the other?
Yeah, all of those boys, you have to remember my Al's mother immigrated to this country with 2 young boys in tow, my grandfather being one of them. He was born in Italy. And she was pregnant with her 3rd son as she entered this country. Al Capone became her first child that was actually, born entirely in the United States. He was conceived and he was born in the United States. So these boys were rough cut characters. They were not the domesticated boys of today. They, would go out and they jump on the back of vegetable carts and steal vegetables off the back of the cart and bring them home and, go out into a lot and play baseball while watching one of their younger brothers. They were just rough characters. So when they would get all together again, that's how they acted. They acted like these young boys of Brooklyn. So their sense of humor was quite remarkable. They were always playing tricks on me. They would, have me, they would put out a finger and they want me to grab the finger and they pull it back really fast. They loved gin rummy and they taught me to play gin rummy. They loved craps and they taught me to play craps. Every time we were together, they were teaching me something. And so it was just a big, happy family.
Now, folks, just to let you know who we're speaking with, but I also just want to tell you, Al Capone was not born in Chicago. He went there in his early 20s. He was born in Brooklyn, as you say, 1899 in Brooklyn. Now, we're speaking today with his grandniece. Now, she's a first-person witness, as she's just related to us, folks, that she has this photographic memory of Al, all his articulations, his smells even, the cigars, and he was very well known for his cigar. Just watch any Hollywood movie, and you're going to see anybody who's playing Al Capone with a cigar, without question, and always impeccably dressed in the movies as well. Deirdre Marie Capone is our guest. The book is called Al Capone, The Man His Family Knew, Uncle Al Capone. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. It'll take you right to a place where you can order this book online. Real life history tonight, folks. Settle in, relax. Lots of time left if you're just joining us. We're talking about the real life Al Capone. We're going to try and break down some of the myths around Al, perhaps present a more family-oriented portrait of that doesn't really get portrayed in those movies. Certainly The Untouchables with Kevin Costner and Robert De Niro. He was portrayed by Robert De Niro as somewhat of a barbaric person. It didn't really get into the humanistic side of him. We're going to touch on a few of those things tonight. Now, I want to qualify that by not saying that he was a saint in any sense. He did not walk on water, folks. He's Al Capone. But in order to understand the times, in order to understand the real-life history of that era, Prohibition, don't forget, and we're going to talk about that as well, we have to understand the human being. And I think that's what Deirdre is going to bring to the show tonight. Lots of time, folks. Get comfy. The book, once again, is called Uncle Al Capone. Our guest, Deirdre Marie Capone, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on that book cover associated with tonight's guest and get this book, folks. Let's go back to Deirdre. Deirdre, what are some of those humanistic things I was just alluding to that you recall about your Uncle Al?
Well, I want people to know that my family always referred to what my grandfather and Al were doing as a business. And their business only involved 3 things. There was gambling, there was liquor, and there was prostitution. All 3 of those things are things that people wanted. I mean, they wanted it. Nobody was trying to ram any of that down their throat. They wanted it. In the United States government, in their ultimate ridiculous thing, they overturned the legality of gambling and liquor in one night. I mean, just one night, all of a sudden, you could not do that anymore. and the people wanted it. Like my uncle said, when I serve alcohol, it's called bootlegging, but when the people on the North Shore of Chicago serve it, it's called hospitality. And then he also said, if I'm guilty of breaking the law of prohibition, then my customers are as guilty as I am. And some of the best judges, the senators, mayors, they all drank alcohol. Even our president at the time, Hoover, drank alcohol, and Roosevelt did too.
Really? I didn't know that, Deirdre.
They drank alcohol. It was always in the White House.
Son of a gun. So the hypocrisy was running thick and rampant.
Exactly. And, you brought up, the different movies and the different things that have been done. And every time a writer, writes a story, every time a producer produces it, or the director directs it, they all try to put their own little mark on things.
Their own
look at how many paintings there are of the face of Jesus, and no two are the same, because every artist wants to bring in something of them. So everything that you read about Al is colored with the paint of that artist doing it. This is the only book. Uncle Al Capone is the only book that is written by somebody who actually knew him. I knew him. I heard him. I spoke with him. I sat on his lap. We ate dinner together. We swam together. He taught me to ride a bike. I know him. I know the family. And another thing, I have 4 children. I have 14 grandchildren. There has never been anything more than a speeding ticket that any of my descendants have ever had. If Al Capone was such a monster, it would have been in the DNA. Somewhere down the line, there would have been somebody that exhibited those same behaviors, just like animal husbandry. You cannot escape that. That does not exist in the Capone family. I am part of the core family. When my Aunt Mattie died, I got the right to oversee the Capone family gravesite. I am in charge of those graves and that gravesite. That's how close I am to the family.
Folks, Deirdre Marie Capone, of course, is our guest tonight. She's the great niece of Al Capone and a grandniece. Just to let you know, folks, an easy way to get her book, and I encourage you all to get this because, as she said, this is the only book, the only document that exists written from a first-person witness perspective. You can reach it at www.nightfrightshow.com. It's written right across here, folks, and just click on the book cover associated with tonight's guest. That'll take you right to a place. You can order it from the comfort of your own home. Very easily done. Should arrive within 2 or 3 days maximum. I know it's readily available right across the country.
And as of today, Brent,
yes,
my book has been on the bestseller list for 13 consecutive days.
Muzzle tov. That's wonderful news. Congratulations. That truly is wonderful news. Right on. Now, some of the revelations that are in the book are going to surprise people. You touched on one, of course. He taught you how to ride a bicycle. There's other little things, too, where you ate together. Could you describe what it was like to eat dinner with Al Capone?
Oh, he taught me how to eat spaghetti, which is really a funny story. Now, when I was a little girl, the spaghetti noodles that you would eat were literally a yard long. They weren't, little short 10 inches or 8-inch noodles that now the stores want because they stack on the shelves so easily. These were literally a yard long. So you would take one noodle and put it on your fork and you would wind it up. But he taught me to put one end in my mouth and slurp it. And so when you get to the end of the noodle, the sauce is flying all over the place. And he would sit and he would laugh and laugh and laugh. But we'd all sit there and we'd all go, that's how we ate our spaghetti.
That's that. I've just got this. Yeah, I think of Robert De Niro playing Al Capone, and now I've got this completely different vision of this person, and did he ever pull pranks on you as Tell us some.
All the time, I mean, we used to trade knock-knock jokes, and like he would say, knock, knock, and I say, who's there? And he'd go, boo. And I go, boo-hoo. And he said, don't cry, Deirdre.
Oh, jeez.
Then they'd always try to say my name was Deirdre. You're Deirdre. And I said, no, I'm Deirdre. No, you're Deirdre.
And
Wait, pranking with me.
And I'm guilty of that problem myself. Deirdre Marie Capone, folks.
I'm Deirdre.
Absolutely. Her book, of course, Uncle Al Capone, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on that book cover. I want to talk some more about... was it ever discussed about Eliot Ness in those days? I mean, Eliot Ness was a real-life figure. Do you know anything about the mythology of Eliot Ness that we've been led to believe that Kevin Costner played him, of course, in The Untouchables, which is the most recent film, that he was this knight in shining armor and he mounted a horse virtually and went after Uncle Al Capone. What's the truth behind that? Was he just out, as they say, some people say, for headlines in the news?
Eliot Ness never laid eyes on Al Capone. Al Capone never laid eyes on Eliot Ness. That whole thing started when Al Capone was in Alcatraz. Sonny was his only son. And Sonny became very good friends with a classmate whom my grandfather helped to immigrate into this country to save them. And it was Desi Arnaz. Desi Arnaz used to play the bongos, and Sonny Capone used to sing, and they would just do all this fun stuff together. Well, Sonny poured his heart out to Desi because of all the pain that they were going through. They would go out and they'd only be able to see Al at Alcatraz once a month. So they would go the last day of one month and the first day of the next month so that they could at least spend 2 days with him. They'd have to go through all kinds of securities. And of course, back then, they had just a little tiny viewing window, and Sonny could only see part of his father's face. He couldn't see his whole face unless his father would, turn his face around. So Sonny was used to seeing this big shot man driving around in these limousines, with all the parties and stuff going on. And then he saw his father like that. It was very, very hard on Sonny. He never, ever recovered from it. So he would pour his heart out to Desi. Well, Desi Arnaz married Lucille Ball.
That's right.
Lucille Ball was a business genius, and she wanted to start production.
That's right.
The very first thing they ever did was The Untouchables. It was a TV show. It ran 2 consecutive nights. My Aunt May, Al's widow, was very upset, as was Sonny, because Sonny would tell Desi things in secret, and he didn't want all those secrets shared. So he called Desi Arnaz, and Desi said, he's sorry, but this is Lucille, and she wanted to start this thing off, and there was nothing that he could do. So my family sued Desi Arnaz, sued Lucille Ball, and sued Desi Lee Productions. I had to sit there and watch those 2 shows and write down the number of times I heard Al Capone's name, mentioned. Well, Lucille, at the very end, she changed the main character of that show to be Eliot Ness. That's how that whole thing started. Eliot Ness was never a player in anything before 1956.
Is that right? You see, now we've just busted down a major myth that Hollywood has virtually taken the ball and ran with.
Yep, exactly. There's so many myths out there, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, I have people calling me and saying, Al Capone died of syphilis in prison. He did not die of syphilis. Nobody dies of syphilis. You have to remember, this is the roaring 20s. There was no safe sex. There was no, condoms. Almost everybody had either gonorrhea or syphilis. And yes, it was a bad disease and it caused birth defects and things like that. So that's why they started to treat things with penicillin in the late 30s. But he did not die of syphilis. And he was at home when he died in Miami.
So he was out of prison. You see, most people think that he died in Alcatraz, of course, and I know, of course, he was released, but most people are unaware of that factor now.
Correct.
What other myths about Al Capone has Hollywood exploited to their own benefit that simply aren't true in your perspective?
They make him out to be a monster, and I try to ask people, was Al Capone a monster? No. He was a mobster. Was Al Capone a villain? No. He was a victim. And people have got to know there's a man by the name of Al Capone. There is a family by the name of Capone. And I am really, I don't know what I can do, but, you know, authors put words in the mouth of my family and they accuse my family of doing horrendous things. I will swear to you and your audience, there was no Capone person, no Capone employer, no Capone henchman involved in the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Let's go there then. Just let me tell folks who we're speaking with, because this is extraordinary tonight. I am glued to this seat, as I'm sure you are. Settle in, folks. You're just joining us. Lots of time left. We're just getting going. We're talking about Al Capone with a true first-person witness. His grandniece, her name is Deirdre Marie Capone. Her book is Uncle Al Capone. The easy way to get it, folks, is with all our guests on this show, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on that book cover. That'll take you right to a place where you can order it from the comfort of your own armchair, as I like to say. No problems whatsoever. Real life history tonight, folks. It won't get any more real than this. We're busting down a lot of those myths, and I love doing those types of things. Now, once again, I want to reiterate the fact that we are talking about Al Capone. This man is not Jesus Christ. He did not walk on water. But as we've just found out, this whole myth about Eliot Ness is exactly that. It is a myth, something that was brought forward by Hollywood. And now we're going to go back and we're going to discuss the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Just let me set it up for a second. The way Hollywood portrayed it, you could look this up, folks. Well, actually, I'll get Deirdre to talk about it. Do you want to set it up for us? Or would you prefer me to? Sure. Okay, let's go.
I'd be glad to set it up. Back in the days that we're talking about, back during Prohibition, the people wanted alcohol. The people wanted to gamble. And the people wanted prostitution also. So those are the only businesses that were set up. And in order to make it work right, the police, the public servants, the elected officials, and the outfit all worked together. Now, Chicago is not the only place that this existed. There were literally these cottage businesses in every single city of the United States. And your show was being broadcast from Canada, and Canada benefited greatly. I don't know if most people know, but the province of Windsor used to be in the United States. And when Prohibition was created, Windsor chose to secede and become part of Canada.
Wow.
Most people don't know that. That's how far back that goes.
Jeez, I didn't know that either. You're educating me tonight.
And also, in every city, there were these businesses set up to try to provide alcohol. See, in the South, in Kentucky and Tennessee and Mississippi, people could, build their own stills and make their own, liquor. In the cities, you couldn't do that. You needed to get it from someplace else. Some people try to make bathtub gin, but it wasn't good. It make you go blind. So they wanted good alcohol, and they were willing to pay for it. So my uncle got the best from Canada and from the Bahamas. Got good scotch, came through the Bahamas. And so every month or so, My grandfather would get together with the leaders of the other organizations like the outfit in New York and Philadelphia and Boston. They would get together in Cuba, and they would get together in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And they would share information. Where do you get the best bourbon? Where do you get the best scotch? Where do you get the best gin? Who has the best vodka? Who are the players? Who will play with you? What politicians will look the other way? What policemen will look the other way? And the police did it. They were paid off. I think my grandfather and my uncle put more policemen's children through colleges than probably anybody else. But that was the way things worked back then, to provide what the people wanted. That's the only thing that they were in. In Chicago, Al Capone only had a part of the South and West Side. It was mainly Cicero. Bugs Moran had part, the O'Donnell gang had part. There were different organizations within the city of Chicago that provided alcohol to their own neighborhood. Every once in a while, one of the guys would get a little, like my uncle would say, never let your head get too big for your hat. And some of the time, these guys' heads would just get too big for their hat. And they wanted more liquor stores. They wanted more speakeasies. They wanted a bigger part of the pie. And so they would start rumbling, that's how you boys are. You just want a little more, and if you can't have it, you're going to fight for it. But they mainly just had that part of the city. That's it. And they only provided those three services. So in order to have everything work, they needed to work together. It's very ironic, but my husband's uncle, the brother to my husband's father, married a woman whose brother was the mechanic that was killed in the Valentines Day Massacre.
Really?
He would come home and he would tell the members of his family that the police were stealing Bugs Moran's liquor. And finally, Bugs got fed up with it. And he told his soldiers to go and tell the police lieutenant about these guys because they were stealing all these cases of alcohol. If the lieutenant found out about it, he would have fired those policemen, and their children would not have food and things like that. They're the ones that set the whole thing up. If you read all the accounts, they say gangsters dressed like policemen. They wouldn't dress like policemen. They would go in there and do what they wanted to do. The whole MO of the Valentine's Day fiasco did not have any Capone MO on there at all. It was not the way Al Capone operated.
Why do you think people have clung to that as the centerpiece, if you will, for this reputation that Al had for brutality?
I wanted to get rid of Al Capone, and it started because Al Capone got very wealthy. He was making $600 million a year. And the business people in Chicago didn't like it. And they didn't like it for a couple of reasons. Number one, Al Capone was looked on as Santa Claus. People loved him. He was like a Robin Hood. After the 29 crash, my grandfather opened up the first soup kitchens in the city of Chicago where they would feed people 3 meals a day.
Wow.
And they would leave food on the back steps of the police stations, for the people to bring home to their children and stuff. They were very well liked. Since people now know how to get in touch with me, I have had countless people come and tell me their father, their grandfather worked for Al Capone and had nothing but good things to say about him. But the business people in the city of Chicago were very concerned because Al Capone was planning to run for mayor of Chicago. He did not like seeing what was going on. Also, the 1935 World's Fair was going to be held in the city of Chicago. And people all over the world were sending letters and telegrams to the city of Chicago saying, will Al Capone be at the fair? I want to meet him. They did not like that. And the most important reason that I want you to know and your audience to know. Because Al Capone was Italian, he was son of immigrants. He could not rise to that point of power. They wouldn't let him.
Oh, you see, I didn't know that about the United States. Folks, real life history tonight. Isn't this incredible? From a first-person witness that was there. Of course, we're speaking about Al Capone, if you're just joining us. We're talking about breaking down the myths versus the reality of the man with none better than Deirdre Marie Capone, his grandniece. Now, the book is called Uncle Al Capone. Easy way to get this book, folks. You're going to want it for your library. It's in my library already, folks. You can go to simply, as always, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on the book cover associated with tonight's guest and order this book. Should arrive within 2 or 3 days. Fascinating real-life history. As was stated by our guest, she's the only person to come at it from a first-person witness and tell the truth. Now, let's go back about some more of those myths. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the entertainment business and how we helped grow that, not only in Chicago, but right around the world, as it turns out, the country as well.
Well, because they experienced the discrimination. You know, the Italians, when they came in at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, they were the low people on the totem pole. The teachers at school said they smelled, they were greasy, they were dumb, they, didn't study, they'd never amount to anything. And so they knew that kind of discrimination. So they had a very open heart to the blacks and their plight. So there was a man that grew up in Brooklyn and was a very good friend of my grandfather's. His name was Oni Madden. Oni Madden started the Cotton Club in Harlem, and it was started to give black entertainers a chance, just get out there and see what they can do. My grandfather loved that idea, so he opened up a twin place in Chicago, and it was called the Cotton Club. But of course, it was downtown. It was in his section of the city, close to Cicero, and that was all white neighborhood. So he had to give armed guards to the blacks on the west side of Chicago to bring them in to perform at the Cotton Club. He discovered Louis Satchmo Armstrong. He personally discovered Elsa Waters. He heard her singing as she was cleaning the bathrooms in the Hawthorne Hotel. Also a big person that he really took care of was Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole was performing in Chicago in 1956, and my grandfather took me to see him. And afterwards, we went backstage, and Nat King Cole himself told me that my grandfather was the one that gave him the chance.
Deirdre Marie Capone, Uncle Al Capone is the name of the book. Real life first-person history. None better tonight. www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on the book cover. You can order that book from the comfort of your own home. Lots of time left, folks. You're just joining us. Settle in that comfy chair. Get the tea going, get the coffee going, whatever you'd like. Just relax. We're going to entertain you tonight. We're going to inform you with real life history from a first-person witness. We're talking about Al Capone, and none better, of course, than her grandniece, Deirdre Marie Capone. The book is called Uncle Al Capone, www.nightfrightshow.com. Let's go back now. I want to say, we talk about The Sopranos, we bring it up to today, and do you feel that perhaps Tony Soprano, this bigger-than-life character, you probably get asked this all the time, may have been fashioned, I guess all fictional, I'm just stopping to ponder and think about my question. I guess all fictional gangsters at some point are fashioned off of the archetype, which is Al Capone. Do you feel somewhat the same thing?
Well, there was the cover of Life magazine probably about 5 years ago. And the cover of the magazine had a picture of that infamous photo of my uncle sitting kind of a side profile, big hat, with a big stogie cigar in his fingers. And then down in the lower right-hand corner of that same cover was a photo of Tony Soprano. So they do, equate the two. And I loved The Sopranos. I thought it was a very good show on right now, and I think it's going to win the Emmy this Saturday night as the best show of its type. But they feature Al Capone in there. I like the man that portrays him. He's a good actor. He's very short, though. Stephen Graham is probably 5'6", and Al Capone was 6 foot tall. But I don't like the speaking role. I don't like what they have him say and do. Next year, they're going to feature my grandfather as a character on that show. So, it just goes on. It doesn't fade away.
Do you feel there's any truth in the way that he's being portrayed in terms of his legend, his negative aspects? Is there some truth, some validity in any of that?
Really, most of what you're saying are negative aspects are all alleged. If you go back and read the original book that was written about Al Capone back in the 20s, none of that stuff was in there. None of the, monster behavior was in there. My uncle didn't like the book, but it showed how, what business acumen he had. It was really my grandfather. My grandfather really ran the business. My grandfather didn't like the limelight. He liked to stay out in the shadows and behind closed doors. At one point, my grandfather said they were running over 300 different establishments, and they did it all without a cell phone or a fax machine. Every employee was paid on time, and they were paid correctly. That's quite an undertaking, in the 1920s.
Absolutely, it was a huge business to run without question. Now, did you ever have any meetings with Lucky Luciano or any of Meyer Lansky or any other reputable gangsters from that era?
Well, I did know Giancana. I did know Tony Accardo very, very well. I did Meyer Lansky, although his grandson is a friend of mine right now.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And his name is also Meyer.
Is that right?
Yeah.
See that, eh? What are your recollections of Giancana, Sam Giancana?
Well, I didn't like Sam Giancana at all. I liked Tony Accardo a lot. He was a lot like my family. They came from the same part of Italy. Back in those days, there was quite a distinction made between Italians and Sicilians. And
I didn't know this.
Yeah, and Giancana was Sicilian.
I see. And Al Capone was just Italian?
He was Italian.
I didn't realize this.
There was quite a distinction. And so many people of what Al and my grandfather did as the mafia. In order to be part of the mafia, you had to be full-blooded Sicilian.
That's right.
Also, they talk about extortion as being part of what my family did. No, the extortion was done by a group called the Black Handers, and they were all Sicilian. You needed to be 100% Sicilian to be part of the mafia. One of the biggest things that most people don't know was Frank Sinatra. Mm-hmm. Frank Sinatra so much wanted to be part of the outfit. He would have done anything to be part of the outfit, but he was Sicilian, full-blooded Sicilian. So he could not. But what does he do? He sets up his own little outfit called the Rat Pack. It was the same kind of thing. He just wanted that glamour. He wanted to go into nightclubs, have people know who he was, have beautiful women on his arms, be able to drink to, as much as he wants to, and not have to worry about a thing. And that was his role portrayal of Al Capone.
Folks, I'm being very selfish tonight, and I'll tell you why. I had promised Deirdre I would only keep her for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Shh, don't tell her. We're 40 minutes and pushing it. I'm going to keep her for the full hour if she is willing to so do the show. I am absolutely glued to this chair and fascinated. How often do you get a chance to speak to a real living first-person witness who actually knew Al Capone? Not only knew him, but is related to him as the grandniece. Her name is Deirdre Marie Capone. The book is called Uncle Al Capone. The only book, folks, and I'm going to emphasize that once again, the only book that is written by a first-person witness. Easy way to get this book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Click on that book cover, order this book. Now, I want to reiterate once again, as I've done a few times, we're not trying to put Al Capone on a pedestal, equal with the Pope say, or some other, he was not Gandhi. Okay? But what we're trying to do is bring a little bit of the truth to break down some of the myths and the dastardly legends about Al Capone that Hollywood has brought forward in order to make a better movie, I suspect. And, there's a big difference between fiction always, folks, and reality, as we know. Let's go back now. I want to talk to you a little bit about his time in Alcatraz. Can you tell us a little bit of that? I was just in Alcatraz, I'll tell you. I was in San Francisco several months ago. And I cannot believe that men were subjected to such inhumane conditions in the West in the 20th century. Can we talk a little bit about Alcatraz and his time there?
I would like to talk about that.
Thank you.
Al Capone was convicted of income tax evasion. He was convicted for the same years that my grandfather was convicted for the same amount of money. My grandfather got a 3-year sentence in the federal penitentiary. Al Capone got 11. After he was sent to Atlanta, that's where he was sent, to Atlanta, his lawyers found out that the U.S. federal government tortured a witness to lie on the witness stand against Al Capone. Once they found that evidence, there is a law here in the United States, and it's called the writ of habeas corpus.
That's right.
And that's where a prisoner can go back to the judge that sentenced him with new evidence saying that he was imprisoned wrongly. Al Capone was 1 day away from being put on a train going into Cook County to present that evidence when President Hoover called Wilson, who was the first warden at Alcatraz, and he said, I want you to transfer Al Capone out to Alcatraz for 2 reasons. The first is you get worldwide media attention, and then the world will know what a horrible place Alcatraz is, that you can't escape from it. The second thing, there is no writ of habeas corpus allowed on Alcatraz. The reason it was because it was a Confederate prison during the Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln removed that right because he didn't want prisoners coming back to the United States. So they didn't have that right out there. But what they did have was time off for good behavior. I went out to Alcatraz. The very first sign you see is a quote that was done by Warden Johnson. And it said, Alcatraz was opened up to incarcerate men who were irredeemable and can never return back to society again. People like, Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, just an awful person. He was the original Hannibal Lecter, for heaven's sake. Those are the kind of people that were out at Alcatraz, not somebody that was convicted of income tax evasion.
Precisely.
But that one thing alone destroyed the Capone name. It destroyed my legacy because he was out at Alcatraz and he had to be this horrible person.
Now, we just touched on something that I wanted to bring up also, the burden of carrying that cross, the burden of carrying that Capone name. If you feel comfortable enough, I'd like to discuss the suicide of your dad. If not, we can just move right on. That's not a problem either. And perhaps you can recount that story and a few of your own personal stories. At the age of 18, you were let go of your first job because of that name. Nothing to do with you.
Brent, there are 3 families, and if you chronologically put them in order, the Rockefeller family, the Kennedy family, and the Capone family. All 3 of those families started exactly the same way. Immigrants, and the forefathers were bootleggers. They ran their own little organization in their city, the gambling, the prostitution, and the importing of liquor. The difference in those families today is that a male child was educated properly, and he got into a position of power so he could bring respectability back to the family name. John Fitzgerald Kennedy played that. Nelson Rockefeller played that. They were educated properly. They got into a position of power in politics, in the law, where they purged all the newspaper articles about their fathers. You cannot research and find out anything anymore. My father was earmarked for that. My father was the firstborn of the new generation. He was brilliant. He went all the way through private schools, through Notre Dame, went to Loyola, got his Juris Doctorate degree, passed the bar exam, but the Chicago Bar Association would not allow him to practice because of his name. It was right about that time the Al Capone was already in Alcatraz, and there was a concerted effort by this group of businessmen called the Secret Six to destroy Capone, destroy any chance of Capone returning to the city of Chicago with any of his power.
So there was a whole outfit, if you will, a different type of outfit, a legal one, if you will, out
Correct.
To crucify him.
Correct.
And anybody associated with him.
Correct.
What led to your dad's suicide? Was it all the fact that he was not allowed to practice law after doing so well and being brilliant, or?
No, he kept trying. The family, would open up. The one business I remember is that he was building manufactured homes. But then, people would find out, he was using his middle name. He was going by Ralph Gabriel. And so he was using Gabriel, but people knew who they were, and it would get in the papers that, this is a business where, Al Capone is laundering his money. So, of course, my father would have to close that business and do something else. And he got along. He left Chicago for a while, went up to Duluth, Minnesota, did some things. My mother divorced him because, she was this party girl, this flapper girl, and she just wanted this life, and she thought she was going to be marrying a lawyer, and that didn't happen. So my father was pretty lost, but he was coming around. Al Capone died in 1947. In 1950, there was a U.S. senator by the name of Estes Kefauver who wanted to make a run for the presidency. In order to attract a lot of media attention, he opened up a Senate investigation into racketeering. This is November of 1950. We here in the United States had just gotten our first little television set, little tiny 7-inch screens, and they would sit on the kitchen table, and we'd all eat dinner and we'd watch television. Well, Estes Kefauver did the Senate investigations at night, right during dinner hours, so all the people could see him, doing his thing in front of the cameras. The very first person they called to Washington, D.C. to testify was my grandfather, Ralph Capone. He was on the witness stand for 3 consecutive days. He was schooled, and the only thing you saw him do was raise his right hand and say, "I stand on the Fifth Amendment. I stand on the Fifth. I plead the Fifth." That's every question that they would ask him, that's what he would do. And of course, the newscasters would ridicule that. They had never seen anything like that before. My father couldn't take that. So he came to the family house on Sunday. I can remember every single thing that we talked about. We did everything. And 2 days later, I'm getting ready to go to school, and the phone rang, and I ran to my mother, and I said, "Don't answer that phone." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because they're going to tell you my dad said." And that's exactly what it was.
Oh, my God. Folks...
Just before my 11th birthday.
Jeez. And you've had to carry that cross as well.
Sure.
My God.
So now I didn't have a dad, and I didn't have a mom for a long time. So that's when my grandfather really took me inside of him and really told me a lot, as did their only sister, my Aunt Mafalda. And they told me a lot, but they made me promise that I would not write my book until all the original family members had died.
Why was that, Deirdre?
Just because of their children, and just some of the pain and stuff. They just thought it would be better if they had all passed on.
I see.
So I was having trouble finding one of my uncles, and by the time I found that he had passed and May, Al's wife, had passed also, I came down with cancer. And I needed to get myself well and healthy before I could take on the emotional impact that I had since this book was published last December.
How's your cancer now?
I'm fine. 10 years, and I'm fine.
Thank God. Thank God, really, truly. Folks, Deirdre Marie Capone's our guest tonight. We've been talking about Al Capone, of course. She's his grandniece. A book is the only book, folks, written about Al Capone by a first-person witness that actually knew the man. Grandniece. I mean, you can't get any closer than that. The book is called Uncle Al Capone, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover associated with tonight's guest. That'll take you right to a place where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. There's a couple of things I want to get to. I'm just looking at the time. We've got 4 minutes left. There's this horrible scene in The Untouchables where Al Capone walks up behind, you know which one I'm talking about. They're all sitting around a table, and he whacks a guy across the head with a baseball bat. That is a scene that has been portrayed in other movies as well. Is any validity to that one?
Yes, there is, but it wasn't baseball bats. It was tool cues.
Can you tell us the story behind that?
There were two guys that worked for Al Capone who actually went to Bugs Moran and made a deal with Bugs Moran that they would kill Al Capone. And they went to Al Capone's chef and paid him $5,000 if he would poison Al's food. Well, the chef, his name was Pepe, and Pepe took the money, and then he went to Al, and he told him, what this plot was. And Al just came to my grandfather and said, I think we need to have a little party. There was a code of honor back in those days. There really was. You knew what you were getting into when you got to be part of the outfit, and you knew what was expected of you. And if you crossed somebody, double-crossed them, did something like that, there had to be some retaliation. And it certainly wasn't the police. The police weren't going to come and arrest them. I equate that time in American history to the Wild West, also American history. In the Wild West, if you rustled somebody's cows or you stole somebody's woman, you were hung by a tree, or you lined up in the street and two cowboys, one at each end of the street, would walk toward each other and draw guns, and one of them would die. And back in the Middle Ages, you'd have sword fights, you'd have duels, you had things like that to retaliate, to set the record straight. And that's all that it was. I will swear on my grandmother and grandfather Capone's grave, there was no innocent person ever hurt by the outfit. There was no child ever hurt, and no woman was ever hurt either. I swear that.
Okay. Folks, we're going to have to start to wrap up now. We've been speaking with Deirdre Marie Capone. We've been talking about Uncle Al Capone, the name of her new book. The only book, again, folks, written by a first-person witness that actually knew the man. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. What's life like for you now, carrying the Capone name? I mean, you've written the book. You're breaking down a lot of the mythologies. Do you still feel concerned for your children bearing that name? You do, eh?
Yeah, I try to keep my married name out of it. It was my children who urged me to write this book. My two youngest sons graduated from Northwestern University in Chicago and then went on to get their master's at the University of Chicago. They were born and raised in Chicago, but then lived in Minnesota and went back to Chicago for 6 years of their young adult life. They would see all kinds of billboards and nasty things all over, like Al Capone did this, Al Capone did that. Well, that DNA is surging in their bodies. And, I mean, we're good people. And so they said, Mom, you've got to at least give your side of things. And so that's exactly why I did it. It was very difficult for me. Writing the book, tears would be streaming down my cheeks. Right after the book was published, I couldn't talk like I'm talking to you right now because my throat would close up on me because I can't even tell you the number of times that I was discriminated against, that I was blackballed, that I was laughed at, I was raped as a young girl because the guy wanted to be part of the outfit. And he thought, I'm a good girl, and so I'd have to marry him. Dumb me, I did. And of course, it didn't last very long. But that's the kind of things that I was subject to. So I ran away. I got up to Minnesota and nobody up there knew anything about me, and my wings literally spread. I have done things, amazing things for a woman of my age, and it was because I think of the Capone genes.
First of all, those Capone genes bear you well because you look like you're 29.
Thank you.
I am going to respect her, folks, but off air she told me her real age. I'll leave that up to her to tell you if she wants to. What is your fondest memory of Uncle Al?
Oh, I think when I fell out of an apple tree when I was helping my grandmother pick dandelions for dandelion soup in the spring, and I had the wind knocked out of me, and he was sitting out there, and he came over and he picked me up, and I could still feel his big hands and his strong arms, and he put me over his shoulder, and he started patting my back until I could get my breath back again. And just the comforting that he did. I just, you weren't afraid. You felt safe all the time.
There's a juxtaposition and a good way to end it, folks. She was not afraid of Al Capone, although he's been presented, as she said, over and over again throughout the interview, as a monster. Deirdre Marie Capone, I urge you all to get her new book, Uncle Al Capone. As always, www.nightfrightshow.com. Thank you all for tuning in. Send me an email. Tell me what you think of the show. You can just do that at nightfrightshow@gmail.com very easily. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
You're listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.